Believe it or not, what follows is an AI-generated conversation, one designed not to mimic humanity, but to illuminate it.
Welcome to Teolumen Insights. I'm Emma.
And I'm Nathan.
Why is there something rather than absolutely nothing? I mean, that question, it's huge, right? It's puzzled people forever.
It really has.
But what if the answer wasn't just philosophy? What if it pointed directly, logically, to undeniable proofs for God? Seriously. Forget faith for a second. We're about to dive deep into how reality itself is structured because the claim here is pretty bold. Understanding existence leads straight to God.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
And look, this isn't about, religious doctrine or pushing a belief system. It's purely about following logic, seeing where it takes us.
Okay.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack some compelling logical arguments for God's existence in nature. Arguments that come from just deeply thinking about reality itself.
It definitely sounds like it could challenge some assumptions.
Well, it likely will.
Yeah.
But we think it's going to be a really gripping exploration, intellectually at least.
Okay, Nathan. Sounds like deep waters indeed. Before we jump into these proofs, are there, some basics we need to get squared away first?
Yeah, definitely. It's important to frame this right. Think of these proofs, these logical structures, more like descriptions after the fact.
After what fact?
After, profound insights or even personal awakenings. They're like maps of a place you've maybe already glimpsed. They aren't really tools to get you to God through just reason alone.
Ah, okay.
True knowing, in this sense, it really comes from a direct, personal kind of seeing, an awakening. Logic then helps you understand the structure, the architecture of what you experienced.
So experience first, then logic to sort of make sense of it, like understanding physics after you see lightning strike.
Exactly like that. And when we talk about experience, let's think bigger than just, the physical world. Science focuses there, obviously.
Right.
But we can also have what you might call empirical encounters with abstract things. Like, think about how certain you feel about 2 + 2 = 4. That's data, in a way.
Never thought of it like that.
Or even just the raw data of your own consciousness, your inner experience. So in this view, a direct awareness of God that can actually be seen as a form of empirical data too. It just doesn't fit neatly into maybe the usual scientific boxes.
Experience beyond the 5 senses. That's interesting.
It is. Now, another crucial thing, doubt. We have to acknowledge doubt. It's practically infinite, isn't it?
Seems like it sometimes, yeah.
So no matter how solid these arguments might seem logically, they might not convince everyone, especially if someone's starting point is already, say, a very strong materialistic or atheistic view.
Because their whole framework is different.
Exactly. Different starting assumptions, different logical systems almost, maybe even different agendas,
Pre-existing beliefs acting like filters, even for logic.
Precisely. And we'll also bump into this idea of tautology, where an argument seems circular.
Yeah, usually a red flag in logic class.
Right. But here, when we're talking about the absolute bedrock of existence, God, reality itself, tautology, might actually be unavoidable. Maybe even a feature, not a bug.
How so?
Because reality, with a capital R, it just is. It has to exist by its own nature. It's self-referential. So any logic exploring that ultimate foundation is probably going to, in some sense, circle back to that inherent self-existence.
So it's not a mistake. It's reflecting the self-grounded nature of everything.
Exactly. And you might be thinking, well, if logic isn't the path to God, why bother with these proofs?
Yeah, I was wondering that.
Because God, understood as this fundamental reality, has an inherent logical structure. Understanding that structure, it can deepen any personal awakenings you might have. It helps integrate those experiences, gives you a clearer intellectual handle on God's nature, even if it doesn't trigger the initial spark.
Okay, that sets the stage nicely. Let's get into the first proof then, the logic of oneness. What's the core idea?
Okay, proof 1. It starts with a really basic fork in the road. Is reality fundamentally one single thing, or is it not? Let's think about that.
One or not one. Seems simple enough.
Well, let's see. If reality is one, truly singular then, think about it. There's no other, nothing outside it, nothing separate from it.
Okay.
And if there's no other to limit it or define it, what does that imply? It implies absolute sovereignty, unlimitedness, because there's nothing else to impose limits.
So oneness itself means it has to be unlimited.
That's the core insight here, yeah. A single, all-encompassing reality must be unlimited. And that's a key attribute we associate with God, isn't it? Unlimited power, unlimited being.
Definitely. But, hang on, what about all the separate things we see? Trees, planets, people,
Mhm.
they seem pretty distinct.
That's the crucial question. But look, anything you can imagine is separate at different objects, different galaxies, even like hypothetical parallel universes.
Yeah.
Your own mind, your consciousness can just conceptually bundle them all together.
Yeah.
You create a bigger concept, a single idea of all reality that includes all those seemingly separate things.
So the divisions we perceive might just be in our perception, not
Right.
fundamental.
That's the argument.
Yeah.
Our perception might create boundaries where at the deepest level, none truly exist. Now, think about the alternative. If reality were truly not one, truly divided,
Okay.
then something would have to be doing the dividing, right? Some kind of boundary or gap. Now, is that divider real or is it unreal?
What difference does that make?
Well, if the divider is unreal, like a shadow, it can't actually divide anything real, can it?
Yeah.
So reality would still be effectively one.
Right, can't build a wall out of nothing.
Exactly. But what if the divider is real, like a tangible wall separating two halves of reality?
Okay, then it's divided.
Is it? Because if that wall is real, then the wall itself, plus the two things it separates, are all part of what exists. They're all united simply by being real. They share an existence.
Ah, so even the act of dividing unites them under the banner of real things.
Precisely. So whether you imagine the divider is real or unreal, the logic leads back to the conclusion that reality, fundamentally, is necessarily one. And this oneness, with no external limits, possesses complete self-sovereignty, absolute power over itself, unlimitedness, which, again, sounds a lot like God.
Okay, that's compelling. But what about things like the laws of physics? They feel like pretty solid limitations on what reality can do. You can't just decide to float, right?
A vital point. But think about those laws. Are they imposed from outside reality? Or are they more like rules reality sets for itself?
Rules it sets for itself.
Yeah, maybe for consistency, for sanity, so things make sense, so consciousness can navigate. If reality is one and unlimited, it chose those laws. And the power that imposes laws also have the power to change them. Nothing external is dictating the rules.
Like an author setting rules for their own story.
Kind of, yeah. It's not a constraint on reality, but an expression of reality's own nature, its own choices for how it manifests. Think about math, a set theory even. The concept of the set of all sets. It's this incredibly vast idea that has to contain everything, including itself. It points toward a single, infinite, all-encompassing entity. That ultimate set is sort of analogous to God, this fundamental oneness holding all possibility.
Wow. Connecting set theory to God. Okay. Let's move to the second proof, the logic of distinction. What's the angle here?
Right, proof 2. This one focuses on, well, distinction itself. The basic idea is anything that exists is a distinction.
A distinction, how so?
Well, for something to be, it has to be just distinct from what it's not. Distinct from nothingness, distinct from other things. Existence itself is the distinction between something and nothing.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. To define is to distinguish.
Exactly. Light and dark, up and down, chicken and kangaroo, all distinctions. But here's the kicker. In an unlimited reality, no distinction can be absolute, because an absolute, unbreakable distinction would be a limit. It would permanently divide reality.
True.
But we just argued reality is unlimited. So distinctions exist, but they aren't fundamental walls. They are more like thoughts held within a mind.
Held within a mind, so physical reality.
Physical reality, in this view, arises from the imagining of distinctions within a greater consciousness. The universe appears because distinctions are being made.
Whoa, okay, so the Big Bang, for example.
Yeah, even the idea of a starting point, a Big Bang, is itself a distinction separating the before, or the nothing, from the after, the something. If you trace it back, if you collapse all distinctions, what do you get?
Nothing.
Pure indistinctness, nothingness. But this isn't just an empty void. It's a nothingness that's indistinguishable from everything. Absolute potential. God, in this framework, is like an infinite mind, the possibility space containing all potential distinctions. It can imagine anything into being.
So creation isn't making separate stuff, it's God imagining different aspects within itself, like imagining a star.
Exactly. God imagines star, and that distinction appears. But it's not ultimately separate. The distinction between star and empty space, or even star and you, can dissolve in the absolute unity, the formless nothingness that underlies everything. That merging is like ultimate love, unity.
Mind blown. Oh,
And this infinite mind, God, has to be unlimited. Because any limit you could propose would itself just be another distinction it could imagine and therefore transcend.
Okay, so that's a lot to process. Let's try the third proof, the logic of limits.
Right, proof 3. This one directly tackles, can reality itself be limited? We start with 3 possibilities. 1, nothing exists at all.
Okay, but something clearly does exist.
Right, so option 1 is out. Option 2, something exists, but it doesn't act as a limit on reality as a whole. Option 3, something exists, and it does limit reality. Only in option 3 would reality be finite.
So the whole proof hinges on whether option 3 is possible.
Exactly. The key idea here is that any real limit on the whole of reality would need something outside of reality to enforce it, which, as we'll see, is impossible.
Outside reality, how could that work?
Well, think about limits you set for yourself. Like maybe you decide, I'm not going to eat sugar anymore.
Okay, I fail at that one.
Right. But you have the power to break that limit. You can change your mind. For a limit to be truly unbreakable, truly absolute, it would have to be imposed by something else, something outside your control.
Like gravity, maybe, or the speed of light.
But we just talked about those laws. If reality is one, it imposes those on itself. So applying this to reality as a whole, for reality itself to be fundamentally limited, there would need to be some external, unbreakable barrier imposed by something completely outside of all existence.
Anything outside reality is unreal.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
non-existent by definition. And something unreal, something non-existent, can't exert any force or impose any limit on what is real. It's a logical contradiction.
So the very idea of an external limit on all reality just fizzles out.
It completely falls apart. You can try to imagine it. Okay, there's a limit. But what stops reality from just undoing that limit? Well, you'd need another limit, B, enforcing limit A, and then limit C enforcing limit B.
An infinite regress.
Either it goes on forever, an infinite chain, which is basically the way of saying infinity or God, or the chain stops somewhere. And if it stops, that final limiter isn't itself limited, meaning it could be undone, and the whole structure collapses.
So no matter how you slice it, reality can't be fundamentally limited.
Logically, no. Therefore, reality must be unlimited. And what does an unlimited reality imply? It implies that everything conceivable is ultimately possible within it. The greatest conceivable thing is absolute perfection, infinite consciousness, infinite love, infinite power.
God.
God. An unlimited reality naturally entails the existence of the maximally great being.
That logic seems pretty tight. Okay, let's get into the fourth proof, the argument from numerical infinity.
Right. Proof 4. This starts with something you do almost unconsciously. Your mind can think about infinity. You can count numbers and conceptually, you could always add one more. Forever.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3 onwards. It's a basic math concept.
Basic, yes, but profound. The key insight here is, how can your apparently finite mind, running on a supposedly finite brain, genuinely grasp or conceive of true infinity if reality itself were totally finite?
You're saying a finite box can't produce a thought about something infinitely bigger than the box.
That's the essence of it. The very fact that you can conceive of a process without end, a numbered line stretching forever, suggests that the reality which produced your mind must itself have an infinite dimension or nature. A truly finite reality couldn't birth a consciousness capable of contemplating the infinite.
So our ability to even think about infinity reflects something deeply true about reality itself. It's not just a mental game.
That's the argument. Some might say, oh, the brain's just a computer, it can run algorithms that represent infinity. But the actual conception of limitless continuation, the abstract grasp of it, seems to go beyond just symbol manipulation.
It does feel different than just calculating.
It does. And you can never prove numbers are finite, can you? The burden of proof is actually on someone claiming reality is finite, despite our capacity to conceive the infinite.
Turning the tables there.
Well, it follows the logic.
Yeah.
And if any part of reality is infinite, like say the potential of mind or consciousness, then the whole thing must have an infinite aspect. Think of a cube. If just one dimension stretches to infinity, the whole cube is infinite in volume, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
A finite container cannot hold a truly infinite object or process. So if your mind can access or conceive of infinity, the reality containing that mind cannot be truly finite.
And this connects to God how?
Because this infinity isn't just numerical. It represents unlimited potentiality, the boundless nature of existence. That's a core aspect of God.
But what about imagining like an infinitely long iron rod? That's infinite, but it's not God, surely.
Ah, good point. That's what you might call a sub-infinity. It's one specific type of infinity imagined within the larger, all-encompassing infinity that contains all possibilities. Like an ant walking on an elephant. The ant might perceive an infinitely long path, but it's just one aspect of the much larger elephant.
So specific infinities point towards the ultimate all-inclusive infinity.
Exactly. Awakening in this sense is realizing that All these pointers, infinite numbers, infinite space, even the infinite fields used in physics, they all hint at the total infinity, which is God.
Makes the concept feel less abstract. Okay, proof 5, the argument from infinite division.
This one is related, but focuses on dividing things down, not counting up. You can take any number, any fraction, and divide it by 2, and then divide that result by 2.
And keep going forever.
Yeah. You never hit an absolute smallest piece, mathematically. The key insight, this mental capacity to infinitely subdivide, reflects the nature of reality itself. Reality is infinitely deep, continuous. There's no ultimate smallest bit.
But science talks about quarks, the Planck length. Aren't those fundamental units?
Science describes the limits of our current measurement and models. But does that mean reality itself is fundamentally pixelated at that level? This argument suggests no. It suggests reality is smooth, continuous, infinitely divisible, just like the number line.
So our math reflects reality's continuity.
That's the idea. Think about pi. Its digits go on forever, non-repeating. That infinite complexity exists within the number system our minds grasp. If mind and reality are ultimately connected, or even one, then this infinite divisibility in the mind should reflect infinite divisibility in the world.
Okay.
And consider your direct experience. Look at your visual field right now. Does it seem like it's made of tiny dots? Or does it feel seamlessly, instantly smooth?
It feels smooth, yeah. Continuous.
That direct conscious experience can be seen as another pointer towards this infinite depth, infinite resolution of reality. So the ability to infinitely divide in our minds, plus this experiential sense of continuity, suggests an infinitely divisible reality. Again, pointing to God as the ultimate, unbroken, continuous ground of all being.
No smallest Lego brick of reality, then.
Not according to this logic, no. Okay, ready for proof 6. The logic of self-creation.
Self-creation. This sounds paradoxical already. How can something create itself?
It does sound tricky based on our everyday experience, but let's break it down. Fundamentally, only 2 kinds of things could exist: finite things or infinite things.
Finite or infinite? Okay.
Now, can a finite thing create itself? No.
Hmm.
To create itself, it would have to exist before it existed. That's a straight-up contradiction. Impossible.
Right. Can't pull yourself up by your own bootstraps if you don't have boots yet.
Exactly. So, finite things that we see, trees, stars, us, they always arise from other finite things. Cause and effect. A chain reaction.
Makes sense. Parents have children. Stars form from nebulae.
Right. But what about the whole chain? Trace it back. Either that chain of finite causes goes back forever, eternally,
In which case the chain itself is infinite.
and therefore it's God, an eternal, infinite process of becoming. Or the chain is finite. It had a beginning,
Okay.
but if it had a beginning, what started it? It couldn't be a self-created finite thing, because we just said that's impossible. Or did it just pop out of nothing for no reason? That's also logically very problematic. An uncaused beginning for a finite chain.
So finite chains seem to lead to dead ends, logically.
They do. Even if you imagine a closed loop, A causes B causes C causes A, the whole loop itself still needs an explanation. Where did the loop come from? Again, you're back to either an infinite source, God, or an impossible self-creation.
So the chain of being itself must be infinite.
That's the conclusion. The process of existence is fundamentally infinite, and therefore it is God. Now, back to self-creation. If reality is infinite, it must be self-creating, because it's infinite. It has no outside. There's no external boundary, no other place from which it could be created. It has nowhere else to come from but itself. Its source must be internal.
Ah, because there's nothing else to be the source.
Precisely. Self-creation and eternity are basically 2 ways of looking at the same infinite reality. It's always been, and its arising is continuous, from within itself.
It still feels a bit weird, like a snake eating its own tail.
The weirdness comes from applying our linear, finite cause and effect logic to infinity. Infinity doesn't play by those rules entirely. Think of God, the infinite ground, as both the unchanging eternal void and the constant spontaneous bubbling up of forms within that void.
Like thoughts arising in a mind.
That's a great analogy. Consciousness doesn't need an external cause to generate a new thought. The entire infinite chain of being is this eternal process of self-generation, driven by oneness. Infinity can have these strange loops where it essentially bootstraps itself into existence across time and possibility. It's the ultimate explanation, really, surpassing finite scientific models.
Wow. Okay. Heavy stuff. Let's move to the 7th proof. The argument from control.
This was quite direct. Again, a dichotomy. Either reality has total control over itself or it doesn't.
Okay. Total control or not total control?
If it does have total control over itself, this unlimited reality controlling itself absolutely well, that's pretty much the definition of God, right? Omnipotence. The key insight. Arguing against this requires something impossible.
What's that?
It requires arguing that something else, something outside of reality, is controlling reality.
But we already established there's nothing outside reality.
Exactly. Anything outside reality is unreal, non-existent. And the unreal cannot control the real. It has no power, no leverage. So the idea that something other than reality controls reality is incoherent.
So reality must control itself.
It must have absolute self-control. And think about it. If you were unlimited and had total self-control, what would you choose to be?
Perfect. Happy. Powerful.
Exactly. You'd choose to be absolute perfection. Infinite love, infinite consciousness, infinite joy, infinite power. An unlimited reality with total self-control would naturally be God, the maximally perfect being.
That's a powerful conclusion from a simple premise. Okay, last one. Proof 8. The impossibility of finite objects.
This one circles back nicely. The claim. Infinity must exist because finite objects simply cannot exist on their own in total isolation.
How so? A rock seems pretty finite and self-contained.
Try to really picture it. Imagine just one single finite thing, a rock, a chicken, whatever. But imagine it existing with absolutely nothing else. No space around it, no void, no background, no field. Just the chicken.
Yeah, that's hard. My brain instantly puts it in something, like empty space.
Exactly. You can't help but imagine a background, a context, a void, a field within which the finite object exists. You implicitly assume a backdrop.
Okay, so finite things need a background. What if the background is also finite?
Then that finite background has an edge, right? A boundary was beyond that edge.
Another background.
You need another background and another. You either fall into an infinite regress of nested finite backgrounds, or you eventually hit an infinite background, a boundless context.
So you can't escape infinity one way or another.
Seems not. A truly isolated finite object, adrift in absolutely nothing, is conceptually impossible to imagine coherently. Therefore, all finite objects, by logical necessity, must be situated within an infinite context, an infinite void, an infinite field, an infinite nothingness. Which, again, points to God as that infinite ground.
And you said this links to physics, too.
Yeah, the necessity of infinite fields in modern physics, quantum fields, gravitational fields, they seem to reflect the same logical requirement. Finite particles and forces only make sense existing within these fundamental infinite fields. The very existence of the finite points inexorably to the infinite.
So even the smallest thing testifies to the infinite reality containing it.
That's the conclusion. So, look, wrapping this all up, God isn't just infinity is a math concept. God is the absolute total infinity that is existence. Understanding infinity, its weirdness, its paradoxes, its all-encompassing nature is the key.
It definitely challenges everyday thinking.
Hugely. Infinity is so counterintuitive, so radical, so perfect, that when people get a glimpse of it, the first reaction is often disbelief. That can't be right. The ego, society, our finite habits, they rush in to rationalize it away.
Because it's too big, too overwhelming.
Maybe too good to be true, even. We need to break free from just thinking in limited boxes, whether it's scientific boxes, religious boxes, whatever, and embrace this deeper logic of infinity. The ultimate conclusion from all these angles is that reality is one, it's sovereign, it's unlimited, and it's an infinite mind. That's God.
And God isn't separate from reality.
God is reality, identical to it. All the finite things we see are just expressions, waves on that infinite ocean, part of God's infinite self-creating process.
That's a truly profound perspective, weaving together logic, existence, and the divine. Thank you for walking us through that, Nathan. It's a lot to chew on.
My pleasure, Emma. It is deep stuff, requires contemplation.
Absolutely. A few final thoughts or warnings for our listeners as they process this?
Yeah, maybe just a couple of things. First, remember God as this fundamental ground sits sort of beneath the level of complete finite explanation. So while we've used logic, there might always seem to be gaps from a purely finite viewpoint. That's okay. Also, I'm human, communication is tricky, maybe I've distorted things slightly in explaining.
Understood.
But the core point is, God, this infinite reality, is ultimately self-evident, more obvious than any proof, really, when you see it directly. So don't dismiss these ideas too quickly just because they're challenging. Maybe listen again. Really engage with the logic critically.
Let it sink in.
Right, because logic isn't just a human game. It seems to be woven into the fabric of reality itself. Understanding that is crucial. But also be wary of the ego hijacking logic to justify its own limited views, materialism, atheism.
Hmm.
They actually become logically incoherent if you don't account for infinity somehow.
Interesting point.
And please, don't take these proofs and try to shoehorn them into validating some specific religious dogma or New Age belief without careful thought. God realization has many levels, and understanding the logic is just one part. It takes work.
So use this as a springboard for personal exploration.
Exactly. See if you can derive these insights yourself through your own contemplation, your own awakenings. Metaphysics is real, it's necessary, and there is a kind of right way to do it the infinite way. This has been my own obsession for, well, 20 years, just thinking from first principles about why anything exists at all. It's driven by wonder.
It shows. It's surprising these ideas aren't discussed more.
It is kind of sad, isn't it? How much mainstream thought ignores these fundamental, almost obvious truths, often because of, frankly, selfishness or sticking to comfortable but limited ideologies. When you approach it openly, from the ground up, it's actually quite simple.
Simple but profound. Any hints about future deep dives?
We'll definitely explore more related logical topics down the line, but for today, hopefully this has been, well, maybe a bit of a performance to make it engaging, but the core logic is deadly serious.
It's certainly been engaging and thought-provoking. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining this deep dive into the nature of God on Teolumen Insights. If you found this exploration compelling, maybe even mind-bending, please do like and subscribe for more deep dives into the heart of reality.
Thank you for listening to Teolumen Insights.